How do you establish a belief in your true identity amid other people's expectations? That's the topic that we're going to address today on Flourish-Meant. I'm your host, Tina Yeager, and today I have a Christie Award-winning novelist with me. She's also a former therapist, and she writes poignant stories about the search for hope, healing, and a place to call home. Her name is Amanda Cox. I am so thrilled to have you on the show today. Amanda, welcome to Flourish-Meant.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation we're going to share today.
I'd like to dive into the difference between a healthy relationship and ones that are unhealthy, that are pressing us to become things that we're not meant to be. How do you know the difference between people that are just godly counsel, godly wisdom, telling you this is really your identity and purpose, and people that are steering you wrong? How do you know?
It can definitely be a challenge, particularly if you're in a season where you're searching yourself and you don't feel firmly grounded in who you are, and having those outside voices, knowing which ones are the ones to listen to and the ones to let go, can really be difficult, because I've had people in my life that were good, godly people who were really kind. They had good intent with the things that they said, but they weren't necessarily helpful for where I was at that phase in my life. And so sometimes being able to recognize, like, these people, the words that they're saying, they come from a place of care. But I need to take that and filter that through my time with God and what God is speaking to my heart, filter it through the word. Because we go through different seasons in life. And sometimes the things that we need to hear, while there were things that people were saying to me were true things, it wasn't that they were untrue, but it was advice and things that I was not at the point that I was ready to take that step forward. And just remembering that we're all in a process, and knowing that, you can listen to the advice that people have to offer. You can write it down and you can pray over that advice. And it doesn't, you have to let God work in your own heart and your own mind sometimes. But knowing that it's always good when you have people who care. When you have people who are asking you to do things that are contrary to what God's word says, if it's contrary to what God has been working on with you in your quiet time with God, then we can know that's probably, take it with a grain of salt and appreciate that they probably do care in some way or another. It's just important to know that it is God's voice that we want to listen for, and that the people who are speaking into our life may mean well, but make sure all those things line up together.
Let's talk about a specific type of context of other people's expectations and shaping our character and our sense of identity, whether for good or bad. Let's talk about family dynamics and how that plays into the need for healing, or perhaps even a resource for healing. Can you talk about how family plays into our sense of identity and how we heal from or through that?
Right. Family dynamics can be a really mixed bag of what is coming into your life. You've got the wonderful, beautiful things, but our dynamics that we create through growing up are just so foundational to who we are that sometimes we don't even realize it. And we grow up and we go often out into the world and we start finding our own identity for ourselves. And then the holidays come around and you're back home again. And it's interesting how quickly we can slip back into similar patterns of behavior. We're like, okay, wait, I thought that I left that behind, or I thought I left this behind, but I'm back in that old environment with those same people. And maybe I actually haven't. And so sometimes it can be an interesting thing where you're trying to figure out, like, wait, did I actually heal from this or did I not? Because I've slipped back into this place. Because within families, we all have our place where we fit. And like you said, family can be a source of support in that growth. And then sometimes families can be a little resistant to that growth because you are changing from what they're accustomed to. And if you fit in a place in a family and then suddenly you begin to change and you begin to grow and the rest of the family hasn't done that same work, then it feels to the rest of the family that you've thrown off the neat and tidy way of functioning that everyone has when you have maybe done some work in areas that maybe your family hasn't.
What role do our expectations play in preventing us, especially when it comes to shame, from becoming who we are meant to be?
Shame is such a tricky, slippery slope and does such a great job of holding us in one place. All of the shoulds and I ought to be's um, really can limit what we are able to, it can limit our growth. It can limit what we are trying to accomplish in our life as we pursue God. Because when we're stuck in the shoulds and ought to be's, it keeps us from looking at where we actually are. And so that shame of like, well, I should be further down the line. I should be over this by now. I shouldn't be in the same place. It limits us because we aren't being honest with ourselves. And I think sometimes not honest with God because maybe we're embarrassed that we haven't had the growth that we want. And so when we are kind of held in that spot by shame and our own expectations of ourselves, again, it doesn't allow us to be fully honest with where we're at. And when we are fully honest with ourselves where we're at, that's where I believe real work can begin and real growth can happen. When we can say, okay, I see where I would like to be, but I'm not there. So acknowledging where I actually am now, what is the first step? Because if we try to work on where we think we should be and we're not there yet, we just end up frustrated and discouraged.
In addition to healing the things that we say that are unkind about ourselves, some things that get in our way have to do with the way we see other people in the world around us and the bitterness and the resentments that we have set up as walls that will actually prevent us from becoming who we're meant to be when we're expecting the worst of other people. Can you talk about shaping our sense of others and our expectations of others in a healthy way?
Right. In the same way that we get limited by the expectations people have for us, we can be limited in our healing because of our expectations of others. And being able to recognize the places and the boundaries in our life that are ours to deal with and the places that are other people's work. When we're able to take ownership for our own thoughts and our own feelings and our own actions, it becomes really important. Being able to see the difference between how someone's actions may have affected us, but where is our responsibility? Our responsibility is how we respond to it. Our responsibility isn't to change that other person or for that situation to be different. And so it becomes really important to walk in forgiveness, which is not an easy word. Sometimes it sounds like an easy word. Well, just, the answer is just to forgive. But that can often be a really painful and self-sacrificial process in which you are not continuing to hold someone else in contempt for something that they have done in the past. And it's also really tricky if maybe that person hasn't expressed any regret for the actions that they have had. But again, if we continue to live under that bitterness and that anger and not owning, okay, this is my bitterness and this is my anger. Now, what do I do with it? When we expect someone to do something about the bitterness and the anger that we carry, then it causes us to, again, be stuck in the same place and to be really frustrated because people aren't going to meet our expectations in those areas. They can't heal us from our pain. They don't have that ability and that capacity.
And also that resentment, that bitterness, that unforgiveness is giving away control over your emotions to other people. You're losing agency. So that impacts whether you can become the person you're meant to be because you've given away all your power and control.
When we look outside of ourselves for our own growth and we're waiting on someone else to do that for us, it's just not effective.
So let's talk about how we can see this in fiction and heal through fiction about our identity. What are some things that you would suggest in your novels that you've got that are available for people to read that could be a healing read for them in this area of identity?
So whenever I write a story, one of my biggest hopes is that someone will feel seen and heard when they read the story. You might not have been through what my character has been through, but there are universal emotions that we all know what it's like to feel those feelings of maybe being left out or being a little lost on who you are, or how, even if you know what your identity is, how to actually walk in that. Because sometimes we know the right answers, but actually walking on a day-to-day basis is a bit of a process. So I like to take readers on a journey when they read stories to see who that character is at the beginning, the areas of pain that they continue to carry, or bitterness or resentment, and how the events of the story open up their perspective in order to see the events of their life in a different way, in a new light. Because sometimes we kind of get in our own lives, we kind of get stuck in seeing something in one way through our own eyes and through our own experiences. So I think when you read stories and you get to feel along with characters experiences that are different from our experiences, but have similar emotions, it opens up our perspective a little bit, and so that we can see the things that are happening in our own lives from a different vantage point than maybe we've seen before.
Do you have a specific novel that you would recommend for somebody who's in this space? And also, how can people find that and stay connected with you?
One of my favorite stories to write with regards to walking through painful circumstances, through traumatic circumstances, and how faith and therapy can play together in a really beautiful way for growth and healing is my book, He Should Have Told the Bees, which is about two women who have both gone through really traumatic circumstances. And through the course of the story, they begin to see they both have similar pain points, but they've experienced it in different ways. And through that story, they're able to see their own life circumstances from a different vantage point. So I really enjoyed writing that book for that reason. And you can find that book on my website, amandacoxwrites.com, and it's available wherever your favorite bookseller is.
I hope that all of you listening feel seen and heard and are ready to take the first step toward finding your own healthier sense of identity. And of course, I also hope that you will come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant.